All right, I've got Sam with me, the VP of Marketing over at Loxo. What's going on, my friend?
Good. Things are good. How about you, man?
All good. We're going to talk about a topic that's near and dear to me, and it's something that I think certainly gets a lot of attention, and rightly so to a degree, but I think sometimes things are taken out of context. And one of the big things that I know that you and I are generally aligned with, although I want to get into a little bit more, is you see a lot of things on LinkedIn or even through conversations on the side that a channel purely just does not work, or more aggressive language like this channel is dead, cold email's dead, Google Ads is dead, LinkedIn's dead, everything's dead. I mean, if you spent a month on LinkedIn, everything would be dead. We wouldn't be marketing on any channels, no demand. And so I think you had a post a while back, or maybe a couple times, I know I have myself, where it's not the channel necessarily that's dead. There may be other channels more efficient, but it's really the playbook, and it's how you execute in that channel and also how you measure it. What time frames, because not all channels operate as a direct response type of channel like Google Ads. And so I wanted to get a little bit into that and your thoughts on it. When you kind of see those messages, first, maybe we can start with that. When you see those messages on LinkedIn or just people talking about it, and people say, hey, this channel just doesn't work anymore. It's not a good channel. Like, what's your reaction to that when people say that type of thing? What do you think through?
They're looking for a cop out because it's not working for them. Like I
Yep.
always go back. I use health metaphors way too much. I post about on Fridays, but like
Yeah.
this one to me, even when I was just like, this is like you go to the gym, you use one certain machine, you use it completely wrong, and then you're just like, oh, the gym doesn't work for me. I'm not going there ever again. It's like, well,
Exactly.
you did it once. You used the machine completely inappropriately, and now you're just going to completely write off that entire exercise regimen as a result. That's the equivalent of saying email's dead, cold calling's dead. It's
Exactly.
like, you probably just used a shit script. You probably had a terrible opener for your cold call. You probably wrote a boring ad. Like, that's
Yeah.
not to say that those channels are completely dead. It's like you tried one small facet of it, and you probably didn't do it that well, to be completely honest. So, and
Yeah.
I'm also talking to myself with this. I've written terrible emails before. I've crafted awful ads before, but I didn't completely write off those channels as a result. It's like, okay, this doesn't work. Let's try something else within this channel.
Right, right. Why do you think that happens though? I mean, why are we so quick to blame the channel and not actually consider some of the other variables? And why does that happen, do you think? What's the thought process there? Just because it's easier, or is there something more?
Part of me thinks it's because it's easier to just say that versus going back to the drawing board. Part of
Yeah.
it is it's easier to take that to your manager, to your leader, to your finance team, and say that for job security, because they're not thinking like, oh, Sam can't run LinkedIn ads. It's LinkedIn ads fault. It's not Sam's fault. It's like, well, if you brought on a different
Right.
marketer who may crack, like Jonathan may be phenomenal at running LinkedIn ads, but I'm not going to tell them that I don't have the
Right.
skill set to run what will be a better way of optimizing on that platform. So I don't know. I
Right.
think that could be part of it. There's probably a couple others. Like, what do you think?
Yeah. I think it comes down to a psychological bias. I mean, it's the fundamental attribution error, like literally at full force there. And I think it's just natural to blame the external factors all the time and not give as much credit to other internal factors because you don't want to consider them. And to your
Mm-hmm.
point, there could be situations where your job is in jeopardy, or you don't want to put your job in jeopardy and shine the light on something that maybe is an issue that you're having. But I think sometimes it's not necessarily even just the person itself. Like, it may not be you, Sam, that's doing a bad job, or me, Jonathan, or whoever. It may be that there are other things downstream that are causing issues too. And I think I had a post that kind of breaks down, and it's by no means thorough, but just kind of goes into like, hey, these are the questions that I would ask if XYZ thing happened. And there's a whole bunch of things. It might be related to, all right, well, what happens after someone fills out a form? What's the process and experience look like from there? To your point about cold emails and people can send cold emails out and all sorts of things. Like, what's the process around that? What's the email look like? How does it read? What are some other things that are happening down funnel? Because, it's not as easy as just saying, what has Google Ads done for me? Right? There's so many other factors involved. I mean, what happens on the first sales call? Did the sales rep properly differentiate the product against the broader category of what they're operating in? Did they do a good job of asking questions and dissecting the problem? Did they do a good job of getting executive help into the deal? I mean, all of these things stem from the same thing. And so you can't necessarily say, oh, it was Google Ads, LinkedIn ads, or maybe it wasn't an ad channel, right? Maybe it was just a different program that, ultimately developed that conversion. And so I think that's where you need to kind of think a little bit broader and say, wait a minute, okay, before we kill this channel, because there's really just not that many, right? There's just not many channels out there for for people in a B2B space to hit their audience. Let's just consider some other things and some other variables about what's going on. That's kind of my take. I don't know. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's having the self-awareness to do that, and it's thinking beyond both. Not to get into blaming, like, did the sales rep do this right? Did we tee them up? But also, did you tee yourself up properly before
Sure.
some of that? So before you sent that email, were they familiar with your brand? Had they seen you all
Mm-hmm.
at events? Like, and that's where it gets into this, just like your GTM ecosystem and how they all play together. So that's like one biggest one you'll often see is cold calling instead. BDRs are like not working anything else.
Yeah.
And I'll usually say a lot of that is because of the predictable revenue model when they're not teeing their BDRs up for success. They're giving them a list of truly cold prospects who aren't on your ABM list, who aren't in your segmentation for marketing. So they've never heard of you, or the last time they heard from you was years ago, maybe if they saw you at a booth when you happen to be at an event or something else. But you're setting them up to call someone in times when people are more and more weary of answering their phone calls from numbers that they don't recognize, or heaven forbid you use one of those fake numbers that looks like your area code. I laugh because I'm in Florida. I get phone calls from my area code in Ohio where I grew up. I'm like, I don't, anyone that's calling me from Ohio is saved in my phone book at this point.
When was the last time you even picked up a call? I mean, like a call that you had no clue what number it was. When was the last time? Do you pick up numbers? Do you pick up people
No,
like just
I
random
don't. I
calls
did
ever?
once a month ago because it was from a local area code here.
Oh, really?
And
So
we
you
were
get that area code.
we're kind of like moving in different things. I was like, it might be the movers, and it's a BDR. Bless his heart. I had zero patience with him, though. I was like, send me an email. He tries keeping me on the phone. He did exactly what he should do, but I was just like, dude, I don't have the time for you right now. And that's exactly what it is. It's intrusive. And it didn't used to be that way. Like years ago when we weren't just glued to our computers working through things, email wasn't as easy as it was to get in touch. So long-winded answer of, if marketing did a good job of teeing that BDR up by having that market be aware of your product, aware of your company, the problem that you solve for, have demonstrated value and credibility beforehand, it's a very different conversation for that BDR. And they're not trying to justify themselves for the first 3 seconds anymore. It's like, oh yeah, Loxo, I know all about you. I just saw your blog post about like this tip that I started using with my outreach practices, and I've already 10x'd my results from it. Like, terrible example I just gave, but showing like, we know who you are. You've demonstrated credibility. You've given me value. Okay, like, yeah, what's going on? Let's chat. And I might not be ready to buy right now, but they're open to the conversation versus just like, get me off the phone with this dude. I do not want to talk to you.
And I can tell you that salespeople know the difference between someone that actually has awareness of what you do, the core things you solve, the use cases, et cetera, pricing, you name it. The calls go completely different. And I can say that with confidence because when I was in sales, I spent a lot of time in sales before marketing. You know the calls when someone already knows you really well. Those are the calls you want to be on, where you don't have to sit there and ask silly questions like, all right, so tell me what you guys do. Like, what makes you different than the competition? Those are the questions you do not want to be getting. You want to be getting into the tactical details of some specific edge case the client has or some specific problem that they want to get deeper in that maybe your website really couldn't address. Like, those are the types of things that you want to get into. And to your point, it's recall and making sure that your ads or whatever program you're running are actually aligned with the key buying triggers that people think of. And so you want them to recall those specific events. I mean, the same way that you think about Corona on the beach, you want to associate your brand with certain things that they think of. So when they say, recruiting, or paid media, or hey, I have a brand awareness problem, or my lead quality is not good, or I'm not getting the ROI I want from Google Ads, you want them ideally to think Omni Lab or another agency. And so those are the things that are really important to your point. But so true. Yeah, cold calls, I don't think I've answered one. I mean, it's just so tough, right? I mean, you're getting calls all the time. If you were there to stop on every single time someone gave you a call, I mean, you wouldn't get anything done. I mean, it'd be impossible.
I'd be fired in 2 seconds.
Clearly people are still picking up phone calls. So
yeah. But there's a huge difference between a planned call. Like, have a BDR that emails you, and it's like, I will quickly, if you send me a proper email or DM with the pitch that lands well, I'll give you my schedule. I'll come up with the time to take that BDR call. But they're so married to step 1 call, step 2 this, step 3 this, step 4 this. It's like, even that playbook.
Exactly.
The playbook just need to be reworked. Like, think about how to approach people in today's world. It's email first. It's not call first. It used to be call first. And that's why I think it's not the BDR's fault, because usually these are entry-level positions. They're not trained properly. They're not equipped properly by their leadership, because that's what worked for their leadership. That's what I think is going to keep working today. So that's the disconnect between former practitioner, now in theory, not having the high fidelity information of what's actually happening on the ground and how can they equip their team to meet the expectations of what is going on today.
100%. Let's talk about one other thing too that I think is interesting, and I think it has a lot to do with when people say the words "this channel's dead" or "this channel purely doesn't work," but it has to do with measurement and the time of which you give a channel in order to see success. And I think you know this better than anyone. I think you know that not every channel and not every campaign can be measured the same way. We have to use different types of metrics to understand the success criteria for them. And I think we're still in a world, and interestingly, just the other day, I saw a Marketing Week blog talking about 2025. A survey was run through a whole bunch of different B2B marketers and CMOs that are planning on doubling down more on performance marketing versus brand. And so you still see more and more people taking the short-termism approach to marketing. And you see all these transactional marketing plays like gift cards and changing everything to get a demo and using conversational ads to just, again, send cold emails just like sales is doing and not do the thing that I think marketing was really designed to do, which is to build brand, to build recall, and do all the other things that are really important. And so I'd be curious your thoughts on, just how you think about maybe different channels. It could be easy. I mean, I hate to make this all about paid. That's just where my mind goes. So if you think of some other channels, fair enough. But like LinkedIn and Google would be, certainly ones. But how do you think about like measurement and the types of KPIs you use and how long you give those channels before you say this channel isn't working for us, or maybe there's a channel that's more efficient? Anything that comes to mind on how you set expectations around that? Because I think it's a really difficult one. I don't think there's a black and white way to approach it, but what do you think?
So to your first point, though, about more organizations shifting to performance marketing versus, taking the long-term approach, I love that for me because that makes my job easier. That makes my marketing easier and more impactful. So please, like all of your organizations that want to have the CFO that dictates that, please keep doing it because it's going to make my results that much stronger.
Good answer.
But for anyone listening to this, I know you don't want that. So definitely take the long-term approach. And that's the hardest part is it's not light switch on, light switch off, faucet on, faucet off, and that you can all of a sudden, spend $1,000, you're going to have 10 demos, 2 opportunities. It doesn't work like that because it is more of the long tail. And without getting into the 95-5 concept that most people are familiar with here, thinking about measurement and timing for a lot of this. So I think the first thing that you have to do, and what I found to be successful, is give up this concept of granular measurement of like what marketing did, what this ad did, because we're not, anything that people are listening to this are selling. It's not just like a go pick a pack of gum up at the grocery store while you're in line. It's like, okay, well, they got this at this Kroger from this line. Like, you can easily attribute that to where it was purchased from. But with these deals that are so complex, it used to be, we were talking tens to 100 touch points before someone make a purchase. We're now easily in the high hundreds, thousands of touch points. And that doesn't even include, that's trackable. You went to my website, you got this email, you got these 150 ads, you got 7 emails from BDRs, but all these things that also are not trackable, the whole dark social concept of, what do you see in the community? You talk to your 3 peers about it, you listen to a podcast, you saw a YouTube video, any of those where measurement is getting really hard. And where I focus more on is I zoom out and look at one, just because the end goal here, we don't have a single ad that we run that's get a demo, that's sign up for our free product. We never drive to our demo page. So anyone that comes to our demo page is choosing to organically of their own volition. So
I like it.
The main things that we look at really from that standpoint are those who do come to our website. Like, yes, we look at those hand raisers to understand what's going on. But the reality of it is that I look quarter over quarter at, I hate to say marketing sourced pipeline and revenue, because that's assuming like they're coming in last touch from demo request from our PLG sign up form. But the reality is, if someone goes PLG with us, they are then inserted into a campaign of ads related just to that. They get an automated email nurture sequence. It has emails coming from our CEO, but those are both marketing sourced. We have BDRs that are going in and running their own play to get in touch with them to be consultative approach. Like, buyers are very smart. On our website, there are 2 CTAs glaring in the top right. Talk to sales, start for free. They chose not to talk to sales for a reason. So they go PLG. We say BDRs. They do not want to talk to you to talk about like purchasing the product right now. So help them. What do people usually struggle with early on in adoption? What are some tips that you can share with them to better use the product, get some results while they're on this free version? Take that approach. But all of those are coming from a marketing sourced lead, right? But what's to say, we even had people, we were just in an event a couple months ago where we had people that were free users and they talked to our account executives and our CSMs who were at that event. So who drives that revenue? Who should get credit for it? Like that's the wrong question to be asking in today's world. But that's what we're still doing. And I think that's what the biggest problem is with measurement. So directionally, yes, like we look at, okay, what is the last touch for marketing? What is the last touch for AE? What is the last touch for BDR? Because we have to plan. 2025 planning is here. I'd be an idiot if I said I wasn't using that for planning. Yes, we're all using it, but it's more to understand resourcing. Do we need to spend more on marketing? Do we need to add more BDRs? Do we need to figure out what's going on with AEs to get them to win more deals or anything else? But at the measurement level, it really is, we're just looking at from an acquisition lens. If we're doing the right things, the right results should be coming. Are we seeing pipeline growing? Are we seeing revenue growing? Are we seeing win rates continue to hold steady or improve? Or are we seeing pipeline dropping? Are we seeing win rates slowing down, deal cycles lengthening? We're doing the wrong things and we need to figure out what that is. And that's where I would say go use attribution, not to see what gets credit, but what did we start doing that's obviously not working, or what did we stop doing that we need to get inserted back into the equation? So long-winded answer on measurement, and I could probably go on for far too long with it, but that's where we almost have to simplify it in a way, and no financial leader is going to like to hear that because they want an ROI on every single thing that they put $1 to. But that's what's caused us to get into this siloed world that we've come into and have these inefficient results, thanks to Goodhart's law of just like we're creating metrics, goals of metrics that are forcing us to focus on the wrong behaviors and do worse things to try to achieve those goals. MQLs, for example.
Right. I want to go back to one point you said, just to make sure I heard you right. So this isn't really on our plan to kind of schedule here of what we want to talk about in terms of channels being dead, but I thought it was interesting. But you were talking about for planning budget 2025, because I know that's really relevant to everyone and what they're thinking about right now, is that you still at some level are looking at, you said last touch. So last touch reporting to understand that, hey, this came from marketing, or this came from sales, or this came from that channel, in order to understand how to allocate resources in those various programs. Is that right? Or any other context I missed around that?
So what last touch, like before they turned into an opportunity, and that's to keep things apples to apples over years, because we've reported for years on this for past 3 years. We've had that. And if we want to keep moving forward, that's held steady. So it's a benchmark. It's not going to be perfect by any means, but okay, like if someone was in touch with the BDR, but they still chose to come to the demo request form, that probably means the BDR didn't stay in touch well enough with them. They weren't super compelling. They didn't email them back for any reason. But again, it's a very big gray area. And I'm not saying the BDR wasn't effective, they shouldn't get compensated. We have rules and comp rules in place that say, if BDRs had activities specifically this type, not this type, within this date range, not within this date range, like they do or don't get credit, because we understand the interplay of it all. But it's just for baselining things as we grow and understanding scalability of the different teams. It's not to say marketing's doing great, AEs get your shit together and figure things out, but it's for planning purposes really at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's tough. You have to use something ultimately. And maybe it's not one attribution model. Maybe there's a couple of different models you look at to understand, how things are moving. But ultimately, like, you got to make a decision on where to put the money. And you got to put a budget line in and say, X team's going to get X money, X team's going to get another set of money. There's an interesting example, though, this has made me think of, where it is complicated and there's a lot of gray area, to your point, where I had a SDR actually reach out to me, I think a year ago or something like that, talking about, I think it was call recording software at the time. And I believe Fireflies, I want to say, because we still use Fireflies today. But when they reached out, I actually didn't respond to the email at all. And in fact, I just completely ignored it. But I remember they reached out and I just went to the website because I wanted to learn a little bit more before I took my time to spend any time with this SDR, because I'd never seen anything from this company before. I wasn't familiar with them or anything. But instead of responding to the SDR, I just went ahead and booked a call on the website and filled their demo form and just came in. And then we ultimately are now, customer, which is, kind of a fast-paced, more transactional type of situation, because Fireflies is a very cheap product. They're easy to get in. It's not a long, type of considered purchase. And we're also a smaller agency, so it's easy for me to do. But I think those types of scenarios are so tough, right? Where I feel like when you have that separation in your example, you could still maybe miss some opportunities where the sales team was driving demand or getting the attention or building some level of awareness with a prospect, but yet they still might take the path of just going to the website directly, because I think it's a very natural thing. And then anytime you get any type of email, assuming you read it, right? And this is just assumes the one email I happen to open of many that you get, that I just decided to go straight to the website because I didn't know or wasn't familiar with the brand. And so I think those are the scenarios where sometimes it helps to your point, have a model, have a set plan. This is how I'm going to resource my budget, but also be open to the idea that, hey, we know these things are happening. And at the end of the day, like, are we hitting the goals or not is still really important. And then obviously for resource allocation, you gotta point the finger at someone. Someone brought in X amount of leads, pipeline, whatever it may be.
Yeah. So you mean SEO didn't do its job there? We should invest more in SEO because that's clearly how you came into the funnel, right?
Exactly.
So that is the opposite to the example I showed earlier, where marketing teed up BDRs. BDRs can also tee up marketing, and this is this is why I say don't rely on one data point. I came from Refined Labs. I'm a big believer in self-reported attribution, not just to be able to go and attribute something like that, but it gets more insights for you, because we see this all the time. I will have someone come in from a demo request and they will say, I heard about you from BDR name. And this is regular. AE name, even. They come in through those channels. So that's where I'll go and look. I'd be like, great. Like, they're doing their job because they've been, especially with the PLG example, they're building relationships. They're building trust. They're demonstrating value. And usually they're saying, like, when you're ready, either respond back or just come to our website. Like, they're letting them come in at their time. People are already using products. They don't have budget right now. They're using something that's good enough for the time being, but if you don't burn them and piss them off by forcing them into the funnel prematurely, they will come back if you truly did all of those things well. So that's where I like self-reported attribution, because it helps to paint that picture for you. And then even in our discovery calls, we have our AEs, we're like, just spend 2 minutes. Just how'd you come across us? I every now and then I'll pick up the phone and call 5 customers that signed in the past month. Hey, how'd you hear about us? Who'd you compare us to? Why'd you go with us? What else were you evaluating? Just literally a 5-10 minute conversation to get some more input, but you will uncover a treasure trove of different insights that aren't going to fit cleanly into like, oh, this was marketing sourced, but like, was it really? Or I didn't even think about this engagement being impactful as part of the journey, but it's come up 3 times out of the last 5 calls that I've had this month, because they did go to this event, but we never would have known because you didn't even scan their badge. They must have just seen us in passing or something. So that's why I say this gray area just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but marketers are honing in more and more and more on this attribution stuff to try to make their decisions.
Yeah. I like your point on self-reported. I mean, 100%. And I mean, something that, back when I was in sales, we always just, before, doing it on the forum, well, not on the forum for a long while, but before it was, more popularized, you were just asking people on the phone. And I like how you're saying, not only there's the forum, how did you hear about us, but just getting on sales calls and actually asking them, because many times when you've got someone on the phone, they're going to give a lot more context than they ever would on a forum. Forum, it's like, I just got to get this thing filled out. I got to move forward. They're not going to lay out a journey and give you all this context. It's going to be stuff like the internet or my friend or maybe a BDR to your point or some other little tidbit of context, but asking the question again and then logging that. It's really interesting because we've had a number of clients that do that and they have all this information logged in the CRM, and you'll see sometimes the differences between what they put in the form and what they're actually saying to a rep. And not that they're completely black and white opposites, just that there's more context where it fills the picture a little bit more like, oh, okay, like that's how you got there. And that can, clearly unfold all sorts of different opportunities where there's a channel that maybe you're not even spending a lot of money on or investing in, whether it be from an organic or paid perspective. It's like, oh shit, man, people are hearing about us from XYZ channel. Like, that's awesome. I had no clue, so good stuff. Well, I want to get in the meat of one thing. And I think you posted this a while ago, but you guys moved off Google Ads. I don't know if that's still the case. Is that still the case? You guys are still off Google Ads?
We moved off, but interestingly enough, just this past week, I tasked my demand gen manager. I said, so we have a very specific sub segment that when you look at the life cycle adoption curve, they're much more, I'll call them early majority, a late majority. So they're still using Google heavily. So with very long tail keywords, I said, I want us to explore going into these because these are also higher ACV clients. So I said, ROI could be there. So I don't want to steal the intro if there's anything that you wanted to get into with teeing up why we turned off paid search or anything else before I get into this to explain like why we're dabbling with this sub segment.
Yeah, the only context I give for anyone listening is that, yeah, I think it was, correct me, a year ago, roughly, or yeah, about a year
A little
ago or
over, yeah.
so, they turned off Google Ads, and you guys decided to move away from it purely because the efficiency of the channel just wasn't really where it needed to be based on unit economics at that time. And so I believe you routed more of that budget into LinkedIn, where you were having some previous success. So it's really, really it. But yeah, get into any kind of details on. I'm sure people would love to know like how much you guys are spending on Google Ads before and what led to that decision. And then maybe we can talk about what you're thinking about regarding long tail keywords and what you might do to start things back
Mm-hmm.
up.
Yeah. So I turned off Google Ads. It worked. I will preface this with it worked. But what it did not work with was the unit economics, like you said, where I could see, because we were going after long tail non-brand keywords with high intent, we we're going after branded keywords. And because this is a very traditional last touch channel where before someone comes in, I was looking saying like, okay, is it worth it? Because these are expensive keywords. They're between $40 and $80 per click. I could run the conversion numbers. I could run the ACV on those compared to the acquisition cost. And I could see my payback periods very clearly. And now we're a low ACV product for our smaller users. We sell to solo recruiter agencies. We sell to large recruiter agencies, but most of them are coming in. We're 1, 2, 3 users, and we have our pricing on our website. We start at $119 per month. So $1,500 a year. And if you run the math on a $50 click at what, a 5% conversion rate or something, I'm not good at mental math in my head, but you can quickly see I think we had one keyword that was under a 12-month ad CAC payback period. That's not even a marketing headcount.
Wow.
That's not marketing tools. That's not sales reps layered into it. So I was just like, this immediately is firing signals off to me. Like, yes, it's working. I can get customers this way, but we're bootstrapped. I don't have a giant budget by any means. Is this the most efficient and effective way to get new customers in for us? And so then I could go and look at, okay, if we pull Google out of the equation, and I just ran this as a test first, I was like, let's just turn it off. What's going to happen to our funnel? Like we were at a point where we could take that kind of bet, because we had signals around self-reported attribution. Where'd you hear about us? How'd you learn about us? Heavy word of mouth, heavy LinkedIn. Recruiters live on LinkedIn. Anyone who is on here has gotten at least one DM from a recruiter on LinkedIn. So you know how much they're on there.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's what led to this hypothesis of just like, if we turn this off, what's going to happen? Will we still get caught with organic? Will they still come in direct or other means? And so we turned it off, and our results actually got better because we put that money back into LinkedIn, which was, we did not have anywhere near budget to, we still don't have the budget to maximize that channel relative to the number of, the size of the audience that's on there, how much we can spend to marry within frequency, different campaigns that we have running, different segments we serve, different regions that we play into. So that quickly told me. And I also watched our month over month and more quarter over quarter. I was looking at just what's the cohorted information doing? How many demo requests and PLG signups are we getting? That number was increasing even though we turned this off. Opportunities in pipeline increasing. Revenue a couple months later, we had to let that go through the cohort, increased. Our CAC payback periods were shortening as a result, and we were getting more customers. So that validated it to me. Again, the channel wasn't broken. The channel's not dead, but it was not as efficient and effective as it was for me to place that spend in other channels at the current size and status that we're at.
How much were you guys spending per month? I mean, we're talking, into 50K and beyond, or are we talking like 5, 10, 15K or so? If you can share a range,
We're a
general
privately
range.
held company. Yeah, I can't disclose hard numbers. I will say it was probably about 25 to 33% of my total ad budget per month went to paid search, to give you a little bit of context into that. That's as much as I can share for here, especially if my CEO is listening.
That bit of context I think is important. And the reason I ask it is because it's important because I think a lot of people have a lot of their budget on Google Ads. And so when you've got a huge percentage of your budget coming from Google Ads, at least from a paid advertising perspective, I think when people hear you say, we just cut off Google Ads, I think the reaction from most people be like, holy shit, like that's the channel I spend more than 50% of my paid advertising budget in for a lot of SaaS brands.
Yeah.
And so I think you saying that not only did the unit economics, at least at the time, not really work because at the end of the day, they were just more efficient channels that were working for you. And so because you were bootstrapped, because you didn't have VC capital, you just needed to find a channel that was more effective right now. It doesn't mean that the channel's dead or you're not going to go back to it. And we can get into that in a second. It just means that ultimately you got to pick and focus sometimes, and you can't be everywhere. And so if you're trying to stretch cash as much as possible, or whether it's a runway situation, if you're VC backed or if you're bootstrapped and trying to maintain a certain level of profitability, sometimes you just got to say, hey, you know what? Like, we got to make a decision to move this. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. And I will say though, after I started my career at an organization, we were a $1 billion ARR company. I had over $1 million per month that I could spend on ads. Like, it was monopoly money to us.
Yep.
And we spent between 2/3 and 3/4 of it on paid search for that exact reason.
Believe
This
it.
was a lesson I wish I could have go back in time and tell myself. We were so caught up in how low can we get our cost per lead that we didn't look further in the funnel. And that today is my biggest thing. Is I will say Google Ads works, but we still are wasting so much money on that platform because we look at blended views. Branded completely skews everything. And usually if you do the analysis, like, you should be using UTMs and all this stuff. Set up single keyword ad campaigns, single theme, whatever you want to do, at least in the beginning, to get data around this. But you're going to find probably 50% of your keywords aren't even converting to leads, let alone pipeline or revenue. And so that to me is where you can pull that money back. You're probably losing budget, impression share to budget on some of the keywords that are converting. So put that money into those, see what the point of diminishing returns is there, and then go find those other channels, put that money back into the other channels that are working for you. I ran this analysis way too much for myself when I was at that first company. When I was at Refine Labs, I'd do this all the time. I felt so bad when I'd have to present these findings to organizations, when like the person in the room was just like, this is not directed at you. I see this across organizations everywhere. It's what Google has taught everyone, and like, that's their monetization machine. I don't blame you. Like, who would know better if you weren't doing this? So that's the caveat I will say is it works, but it will eat a lot of your money if you aren't paying close attention to where those dollars are going.
Totally. Well, so I want to get to your point. So you moved the budget away from Google and you moved it into LinkedIn, and or maybe just left the same amount of budget. We can get into that exactly in a second. But to kind of kick things off, it's interesting. Google Ads and LinkedIn, I'm sure you would agree, are very different types of channels. They're not the same. It's not apples to apples. And so when you use Google, you're usually searching for a specific category of product. You're asking a question, you're doing research, you're giving specific intent of what you want to accomplish on the platform. Whereas on LinkedIn, we're not going up into the search bar and saying cybersecurity software or top 10 best recruiting platforms or something like that. You're just scrolling the feed, you're engaging with content, maybe you're looking for a job, maybe you're trying to learn something new, whatever it may be. And so they work very differently. So I'd be very curious, like, when you were doing your analysis as it compares to Google, and of course, I'm sure they're different, right? In the way that you looked at LinkedIn versus Google, but what were some of the things that you saw working on LinkedIn, and what were the metrics that you used to kind of determine that as it relates to Google?
So the big difference is, it's like, most people listening here are probably familiar, demand capture, demand creation at the simplest term. So when I joined Loxo, we have phenomenal win rates. I've never seen anything like it when I was at Refine Labs, but no one knew who we were. We're in the ATS space, the recruiting CRM space. There's over 1,000 different competitors in those two alone, and we're trying to create a new category. So my challenge was, we need to create brand awareness. We need people to understand who we are, because when they got on a demo, when they saw the product, the aha moment happened immediately. So that told me two things. One, get to people before they enter the buying cycle so that we're in their consideration set. And two, show people the product before that. Because if the aha moment is like seeing it and understanding, it's one thing to say, we're better than your current system, get 10x the ROI, versus let me record a 60-second loom of showing your current process. Let me show you how you could do it in this different way. And it's just like, holy shit. And then they come into the website, they come direct to our website, they come organic search, because again, we're not driving demo request leads. So the metrics that we were looking at on the video side, we look at consumption. It's not click-through rates. I mean, when people are watching video, if they click, great, that's a cherry on top to me. But to consume the content is to watch the video. That's like why, say you have a written case study on your website, you create a static ad that says customer XYZ did 1, 2, 3, click to learn more. In order to understand what all that information is, they have to go to your website and then they scroll through the page to consume the content. So you can use scroll depth, and you can even get into, okay, we ran this campaign for $100. We had this many people scroll to 95% of it. We understood, here's the cost per content consumed. Well, video, if you try to do that same apples to apples, and this is why people rule out video so much, like, oh, click-through rate's terrible, they're not engaging. It's like, well, what's the purpose of what they're trying to do? Is it to click, or is it to consume the content? And so that's why I love
Exactly.
LinkedIn. Like they can show video percent viewed, 50%, 75%, 100%. So I do run the same exercise. Spend $100 on here. How many people make it to 75% to 100%? And so that's where we looked at metrics of like, are they watching the content? Are they consuming the content? Because that's what we want them to do at the end of the day. And then the other is, since we were in such a crowded space as we create this new category, one of our biggest advantages, aside from being just like startup test things, we're not locked into anything, is that our competitors suck at creative. Like to be blunt, like everyone uses the same blue background, everyone runs the same boring message and copy. So I'm like, let's do something different. And so part of the money that I pulled back from Google Ads, I said, let's take a really big swing with this thing. And so we went and partnered with Video Brothers to create this basically a true commercial, like for television, high production value. Was not cheap, but it was well worth the investment because we then pushed this to LinkedIn. We pushed this to CTV.
Right.
And what it does is, as we're a startup and people aren't familiar with us, one, we're showing up on TV. So people are just like, oh, like they've got to be big if they're showing up on my TV, because we all associate that with like only big companies can show up in those.
Right.
Lo and behold, they don't know CTV is opening up to B2B and making it accessible for people like us. But the other side of it is just the ability to be different. Like we had commercials with Bigfoot, with Alien, and they were funny and humorous. They were still able to like relate. Thank you. They were still relatable because we used the lingo that recruiters use and different scenarios that they encounter, but it had a humorous twist to it. People consumed these like absolute crazy, and they remembered us as a result. And so that's where some of it's soft metrics where you're not like brand recall. I didn't run a recall or brand lift test with LinkedIn after that, but when I would listen to sales discovery calls on Gong and the number of times that I would hear, I saw your commercial, or we even had prospect who went completely cold, call our CEO back. He still does founder-led sales. He's just like, man, I was thinking about you guys the other day. I saw your commercial on TV. I was like, I have to get you all back in here. So there's these different points where that's not going to show up in attribution anywhere. And that's like, not to come back to that conversation, but
yeah,
these are things that our competition isn't doing. It's different, so it stands out and it's memorable. These are going to become best practice eventually, unfortunately, and become average, and we'll have to go on to find a new set of novel, different, unique things. But these were really how we approached brand awareness on these channels, where we only have a limited budget. We have to stand out in a way to do things. So it's not just, okay, let's run 5 different variants of an ad. Which one? Well, this one has 0.21 click-through rate. This one has 0.24 click-through rate. This is the best one. Let's go and iterate off of this. It's like
crazy.
That's not a big enough lift if you want to make incremental or truly not incremental growth, truly like my mind is exponential. Thank you, Sam, for taking my song. Exponential growth, because that's the level that we have to be playing at right now with where we're at as a company. Is like we can't just chip away at these tiny 0.01% improvements. Like we have to make substantial impact to our pipeline if we want to continue to stay around.
Right. I'm sure people would want to know, like, can you share just rough ranges on what you guys spent on the ad or ads? I assume you probably did like a whole production run within a day and then maybe clipped it up so you get a lot of additional footage. Any general ranges people should expect when they're spinning in video? Because I think it's not one of those things that most people want to invest in, given the cost to get full stage actors out there and the whole 9 yards. But what was the general range?
It's how you think about it too. So when and their prices have probably changed. So when we did this, it was over a year ago. They were just getting started. It was, I'll say it was between $30,000 and $70,000, just to not pigeonhole them if anyone's listening and wants to go and use them.
Yeah, a year ago, inflation is still real. It's probably a little bit more than that. Who knows?
But it's a hefty investment, especially for an organization like us. So yeah, anyone's going to look at that lineup and be like, how did you spend that? You don't have, like, that was a lot of your budget. How did you do it? But then if you go and look at, well, how long did we use it for? We're still using those assets today. So like when you go and spread that, okay, what does a designer cost you per ad suite? What does a copywriter cost you per ad suite? And anything else? And if you add those up, like if you're doing one a month or something else, okay, look at all those hours, how much you spend. We had all of that creative, the B-roll footage that we were repurposing, reusing. We're using it on our website. We're using it in all these different places. So the cost evens out over time if you continue to use it and not think of this as just like a one-hit wonder, but how are you incorporating it? So we ran those commercials heavy at the beginning of the year. We started to taper off into the summer months. They were off July through October. Well, November is here. Thanksgiving's right around the corner, followed by the holidays. Guess what a lot of people do around that time? They sit on their couches and watch TV. Guess what we're going to do at that time? We're going to turn these ads back on. Because again, it's like the funny commercials that you all like, Jake from State Farm, Flo from Progressive. Even though you saw that commercial a year ago, if it's been off a little bit, you see it again, you laugh. You think it's funny. You still like, you enjoy it. It doesn't go away or diminish. So same exact approach is, it's not a one and done. Just because you used it once, it can't be used again. Like you can use these intelligently to make the investment well worth it and then some.
I haven't seen all the ads. I know I've seen a couple of them, but I'm forgetting. Is there a situation where you see this with video creative specifically where, for example, Lavender has had that same guy in a lot of their videos? I think they've done that through multiple shoots from talking with Will and team. But do you feel like it's a situation where a brand invests in video and they now start to associate themselves with a mascot of sorts or whoever the actors are in that video, and that they should stay consistent with that? Or do you think that's really not as important? It's just about making sure that the brand message is clear, what you want them to recall, and the brand associations you want are clear in the video, but there really doesn't need to be as much concern with changing up the type of mascot? Because I know that's come up with a few clients we've worked with regards to just video content in general, and like, hey, we can't get the same people here, or putting on contracts with the same actors so they can continue to do new stuff with the same guys, assuming it's working.
Yeah. I would love to be able to give you an answer for that. We've done one shoot with one group of people. I can tell you we have had conversations about, like, when we do this again, will we use the same actors? Will we use the Bigfoot and Alien again? Will we try something different? And it's been for those exact reasons. The association, the recall of tying that back in your brand is strong. Will people remember you more? Or do we want to try something different? Like, let's try a different angle, a different message, a different something, because we don't want, like, that may not have landed for some people. Like, we ran an experiment. There's a big segment of recruitment agencies in Germany. And so we wanted to try out what happens if we go and work there. So we partnered with Yoyaba on this. They're based out of the DACH region. And I was like, hey, we ran these Bigfoot ads. They did great. And the first thing they came back to us and said, Bigfoot is not a thing here. You can try it, but it's not going to land. And I was like, great, that's perfect insight. So that's another example of, like, what may work well in some markets. You'll want to be mindful of that if you do expand. Like if you're doing US only, great. Yeah, you probably know the demographic there. But say you ran this in the US, you want to run part 2, but expand UK, Germany, Japan, wherever. Like, understand those markets, and if those themes, those pains, those messages all resonate equally there, or if there's anything that you might want to keep in mind with that. So long-winded way of saying, I don't know. Like, I'm torn on both, to be honest.
Yeah, because to your point, Flo's a good example. I mean, Flo, I don't know if they're still doing active commercials, but I know they had a contract with her for a long while, and they did a whole bunch of different shoots with her over time. So, it's one of those things where you think Flo, you think Progressive, right? And it's just like the same person. If they swapped it out for someone different, it just wouldn't make as much sense. Maybe they've done that since. I haven't seen their ads in a while, but Flo's like literally the only name that comes to mind when I think of Progressive now.
One thought that comes to mind as we're talking about this in these examples, Flo from Progressive, Jake from State Farm, Mayhem from Allstate, we're saying these people and associating with the brand. These are commodity spaces. It's like, how do you stand out within this when y'all are like the Geico from Gecko?
Yeah.
That becomes a point of differentiation, like that humor, that message. So I wonder, like, maybe there's something to be said there for if you're in a commoditized category, that would work better for people remembering you and your brand. If you're in a space where you're creating a new category, or there aren't really any players with strong points of view that you need to compete with, you could probably go with the multiple angle approach, because people will remember you for having a strong point of view for doing different things than for having this one specific character throughout the entire series.
Totally. Yeah, it's something that we've talked about doing for Omni for a while. You're giving me more inspiration to do that. I mean, it's not a ridiculous budget. It's definitely a good portion of money for sure. But I want to roll back on one thing you mentioned, and then we can start wrapping up here. You can add anything other that I missed, maybe you didn't ask about. But as it relates to consumption versus conversion, so you talked about LinkedIn. So going back to the point of switching from Google to LinkedIn, your whole point was, hey, we just started looking at consumption-like metrics, like percent of video views, time on page, other things like that than your typical metrics like click-through rate and conversions, when you weren't really expecting to have a lot of direct attribution, it sounds like, maybe putting words in your mouth there on LinkedIn. But how do you sell that idea to management? I mean, this is like the age-old thing that I feel like every marketer and their mother has a problem with, which is if you've got a non-marketer and they're looking at things in an Excel spreadsheet, they got their investor hat on, and you're saying, hey, we're going to spend $40,000 on this thing, this gorilla, this caveman or whatever thing. Like, how do you message and communicate those types of metrics being the core metrics that you're going to look at? Or is it a broader thing and saying, hey, listen, we're not going to look at this one campaign, to your point earlier, and say, this one video ad resulted in XYZ. You're just going to say, hey, broadly speaking, we've seen since we've launched this an incremental increase in XYZ? Or did you guys do anything advanced like incrementality tests, like anything like that? How do you message that? I think that's the bottom question for me.
Yeah, that's $1 million question.
Tough one, right? Yeah.
I will say the first thing, the most important thing is trust. Like, your leadership just has to trust you first and foremost. You've either done this before, you can back it up, something else. But if you don't have that and you're coming and pitching something like this, just don't even bother building that deck. Find a way to get their trust first. Next way to get into it is I like to just ask the leadership, the CFO, just say, like, tell me about the last purchase that we bought here for the company. What was it? Oh, we bought HubSpot. Cool. How'd you find out about HubSpot? Tell me about that process. Well, my buddy Bill over there is the CFO at this company. They use HubSpot. Okay. So he told you about it. Cool. And then he recommended listening to this podcast where the CEO is talking about it. And then so all these basically points are coming up that, one, aren't coming to very easily attributable places, and two, sometimes you will hear these creative things or something different that stands out. I know HubSpot is a good example. Gong, when they read their Super Bowl commercial, I'm sure that they had a ton of people that came in and said, like, oh, I saw their commercial on that, or I was watching their YouTube series on XYZ, how to do something. So those are different places where you're going to be investing this type of money into it. So I like to ask them that question and then follow it up with, I'm going to show you two charts. One's going to have lead volume going up, but your revenue decreasing. One's going to show your lead volume going down, but your revenue increasing. Which scenario would you rather have? If they don't answer leads down, revenue up, then leave that organization right away, because they are focused on the wrong things for you as a marketer. Because I say that's what's going to happen. More lead volume is not the answer. That's not what's going to keep business open, especially as we look at how today is by today. We need to be memorable. We need to be helpful. We need to drive education. We need to create a relationship with them where they want to come to us. And that's going to mean lower volume because of the 95-5 rule. People are only going to come to market when they do, but when they do come to market, those people are going to convert at such higher rates that we're going to see that revenue go up. And as more of the market becomes familiar with us, as like where we used to have 100 people recall us in a quarter, now we'll have 1,000 the next quarter, 5,000 the following quarter. So we'll still win at that rate, but that's why the revenue is going to continue to grow in this great way. And word of mouth. If we're onboarding them well, if they have a great experience with us, that's going to increase even more because they're going to want to share this. Do you see this funny commercial? This company I work with use, like, can you believe they did this? You're going to get that type of promotion from it. So it all comes back around in that way. So those are the ways that I like to tee up that conversation before saying, I need $40,000 for this big swing that I'm not going to be able to put any attribution towards.
And I think the key word you said is, like, having that trust from the beginning is so critical, because if they're not there, then you'd never get that, type of campaign off the ground. And I think too, to back it up, is that being very clear on what the success criteria is and the measurement for what you're going to do. So after you spend the 30, 40, 50K or whatever on a really cool video and a handful of different clips, then it's like, okay, here's what we're going to be looking for. Here's what it's going to look like, and here's the time frame that we're going to look at that information. Are we on the same page? And obviously this comes pre-shoot clearly, right? And so if you can get to that point, then of course, then there's pure alignment. Hey, we already discussed this. This is how we're going to measure this. We're all on the same page. I mean, sometimes you have to kind of reinforce that over and over again because people forget and they start just looking at, all right, hey, what are the conversion metrics on that last video campaign, Sam? How things performing? I know it launched just a month ago, but I'm just curious, how many leads are we getting? And you're like, wait a minute. We already aligned on the fact that that's not how we're going to directly measure the success of this campaign. And I love what you said too. It's something that we do a lot, which is just asking them how they bought a piece of software in the past. And they're not going to remember every little thing they did, but you're keying off the one important thing is there are always multiple things they're going to say. They're going to say the podcast, this, that, whatever it is. Like, they're going to say something, but it's not going to be this one thing. Unless it's the most memorable thing, there's always multiple things if you pry a little bit deeper. And so I think that's where it becomes really obvious, where we get ourselves out of the world of this ad or this campaign did this or that. And we get into the world understanding, hey, cool, we know that there's going to be multiple touch points, likely factor. And it sounds like even with a relatively low ACV product like yours. I mean, you're talking about, what was it? I think 1,500 you said per year, roughly. I mean, even at 1,500 per year, you're talking about not a straight line type of like, hey, saw this one thing, did this one thing. And so I think it's important to remember that even in situations like Loxo, when you guys are lower ACV, you suffer from the same issues to a degree as, say, a larger ACV company. You just may close the deals maybe a little bit quicker. Maybe your sales cycles move a bit faster because it's easy to prove something that's $1,500 versus $100,000.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, nope, it's true. It's possible. And even, I mean, $1,500 ACV for our single user for 1 year, and we're still our ad CAC payback. So ad spend, we're 3 to 4 months. So I know that's always like, if you're low ACV, is that possible? Like, it's possible, but we've been going at this for a long time, many quarters, and that's what allows us to get to this level, because that flywheel has created. If you expect a 3 to 4 month ad CAC payback period in your first quarter, that's not going to happen. That's not realistic. And that's where the trust part comes in. And like you said, you have to map it out for the stakeholders so they understand when to expect things and what to expect to happen during those.
Totally. Love it, man. Great convo. We'll have to go deeper. I have more questions, but I think we'll call it here. But if people wanted to connect with you, where's the best place to go? I know you're pretty active on LinkedIn. Anywhere else that you spend time on? Yeah,
LinkedIn's the best spot. Spend a lot of time there, DMs, and then got a Substack. It's just my name, samkuehnle.com. Head there, drop a different thought every Saturday morning. But those are probably the two big ones. Not too big on Snapchat, Instagram, or TikTok, unfortunately.
Not yet. I don't know. Maybe one of these days, right?
I pray not.
All right, man. Well, love having you on. Thanks for sharing some stuff, and we'll chat here later.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right, big guy. All right. Well, thanks for listening to the Demand Podcast. If you liked this episode, could you do me a huge favor and leave a review? We would really, really appreciate it. This will not only help more B2B marketers learn what's working and what's not, so we all can drive more demand for our businesses. Also, if you happen to be in market and you're looking for a great partner to help manage paid media, build engaging ad creative, or set up proper conversion tracking, go to www.omnilabconsulting.com or find me, Jonathan Bland, on LinkedIn. We'd absolutely love to have a chat with you. Thanks so much, and see you in the next episode.